Margaret, Peggy Rozga, served as the 2019-2020 Wisconsin Poet Laureate. She has essays forthcoming in MAMAG Review and Wisconsin Magazine of History. Her fifth book of poems, Holding Myselves Together, a new and selected poem, is forthcoming from Cornerstone Press in May 2021. She's co-editor of the anthology Through This Door, Wisconsin in Poems from Art Night Books 2020. Her other books include 200 Nights and One Day, poems about Milwaukee's 1967-68 fair housing marches, and Pestiferous Questions, A Life in Poems, which features politically well-connected Jessie Benton Fremont in 1824 to 1902, facing issues of women's roles, the expansion of slavery, the Civil War, and its aftermath. She is an emeritus professor of English at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee in Waukesha, and was recently chosen the first scholar artist in residence at UWM at Waukesha Field Station. So welcome very heartily, Peggy Rozga.
Thank you, Sarah. And thank you, Nancy, for getting us started in your wonderful, warm-hearted, beautifully worded way. Even if I've heard your poems before, and I think I only heard one before, I love it more every time. I also want to thank Nancy because she has agreed to help me with the leadoff poem that I want to read here tonight. It's a poem for two voices called Amplifying Hope. I hope no one gets hurt. I hope the earth survives.
I hope we all survive.
I hope there's space for Izzy to become an artist.
For Leah to make music with her small violin.
I hope to open my refrigerator to yellow, orange, and green peppers, to kale, beets, carrots, turnips, tortillas, eggs, butter.
Even meat.
I hope words don't fail me.
I hope I don't fail words.
Don't forget what goals I set.
Don't forget to set grand goals.
And don't forget little ones, the fun of playing in snow despite the cold.
Of cold water from a summer's sprinkler.
Listening to the grown-ups when they think they're unheard or the message missed.
Don't forget to tell the little ones what our little hopes were, how we healed.
How odd we were at autumn's ginger moon, low on the horizon. How we learned the earth turns. How in all the gnarled world people already hurt.
Already hungry, already rendered speechless.
Can't hope this world. May that scant hope not be dismantled.
May the dismantlers not make things worse.
What if we are our hope?
We hold our hope in our clasped hands, in our broken, open hearts.
I hope.
We
hope the
the
world
earth survives.
Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you, Margaret.
I want to begin with that poem because I'd like to weave elements of hope into this reading in several spots. I think hope is something we need, something that helps us hold ourselves together. But I also wanted to begin with that hope, with that poem as an example of a poem that employs more than one voice, because the summer issue of the Wisconsin Fellowship of Poets literary magazine, Bramble, which I have agreed to guest edit, is going to be focused on poems that in one way or another incorporate multiple voices. And that's one way to do it. You can also do it by just having a line of dialogue, somebody else speaking in a poem, or writing a cento, or actually there's a list of possibilities on the WFOP website as along with the call for submissions. So I just want to give this little push that submissions are now open. If you go to the WFOP.org website, you'll see the call for poems. And they can be this kind of multi-vocal poem, but they don't have to be, that other poems will also be considered. And the other thing about beginning with that poem is that kind of incorporating many voices or other voices is important to my view of poetry, and one of the things that poetry can do. So I'd like to also read a poem that is expressing that view of poetry. It's called Ars Poetica. It's in through this door, Wisconsin in Poems, the anthology that Sarah mentioned. It's in two parts. Ars Poetica. Poem, solo, alone, lonely. Poet isolated, solitary, as in confinement, as in prison, as in Paul and Silas were bound in jail, had no money for to go their bail. As in, what's the usual, the expected, the almost cliched performance, one reader, one voice, many poems written from the heart, written for the eye, written from the lonely room, in the lonely garret, all alone. Part 2. Duo poem, two-voice poem, poem open, open poem, poem opening, opening doors poem, spoken poem, song poem. Freedom floats on currents of energy, the spirit to open doors. Each note, each whole, half, quarter, eighth, syncopated whole breath floats north, opens, lifts every voice. Paul and Silas began to shout. The jail doors opened and they walked out. Poem rallies, poems protest, closed doors, welcome the lonely, look out, invite in, sing solo, but invite chorus. Word a way out, I to we, my to our, you. Open poem out, poem outdoors, poem plus, poem echo, poem double down, double out, to get poem, poeming going. I meant to warn you that I might sing. Didn't know if I would actually be able to do it. So anyway, there it is. I'd like to read a couple of poems from Pestiferous Questions, A Life in Poems. As Sarah said, it's the life in question is Jessie Benton Fremont's. She lived during the 19th century, was politically active, especially in the run-up to the Civil War. She's usually defined in terms of her father, who was a senator from Missouri for 30 years, or in terms of her husband, John Charles Fremont, who was an explorer and not very well known, but he was the first Republican candidate for president in 1856 before Abraham Lincoln. He lost. He ran on a platform of not expanding slavery, which is how the Republican Party was founded. But I'm interested in Jessie for her sense of power, for her hopes, for the way her life intertwines with issues of her day, which was mainly the expansion of slavery and women's roles, and for what she does when those hopes are dashed. There are 4 sonnets in the book, and I'd like to read the first 2 of them because they give you an indication of that relationship aspect of her life, her marriage to Fremont. Jessie's father was a Western expansionist, but he did not want slavery to be expanded in his household. The people who had been enslaved were freed well before the Civil War. And that really happened under the influence of Jessie's mother. But anyway, so he liked Fremont for his capabilities as an explorer, but he didn't think too much of him as a possible husband for his daughter, with good reason. So, and Jessie was underage. She was 16 or 17 when they eloped. Jessie, brilliant night. We walked out into the autumn chill, changed as if we had crossed more than muddy lanes. The hem of my dress unsoiled, the way a blur. Soon, love, soon. Mr. Fremont's words floated with me back to my C Street home. Inside, all doors were closed, sweetly closed, mercifully closed. Father going over notes for her speech. Mother, my sister's hushed tones. I dismissed Harriet after she helped me brush my hair. I opened the window to see the stars. Mr. Fremont knew how to plot them, how to calculate position. Mr. Fremont. John. Mr. Fremont. Mrs. Fremont. I was sure we would be all right soon. Jessie's father arranges to have John lead an expedition westward. And so she's alone much of the first year of their marriage. Jessie, happiest hours, but then. My splendid health never failed me with child months alone. Mr. Fremont did not fail, returned home. Lily arrived days after her dauntless father. He had claimed the highest Rockies peak and spread that same wind-whipped flag over us. Triumphant time. More acclaim for the printed report I wrote for Mr. Fremont's spoken word, purpose-driven days, our best, family, work, jointly done. But then the first 5 of our 8 years, I faced more lonely waiting for his return. My heart aching. Going to skip over a lot of their life together. It wasn't just his absence, it was his inability to succeed at anything else that he tries. He loses the presidential election. He's briefly a Civil War general, doesn't do well at that either, becomes an investor, loses all their money. And so when Jessie is offered a job writing for New York Ledger, a popular magazine, she becomes the breadwinner in the family. And this is the point at which I identify with her. Jessie composing herself. Like most writers, Jessie begins with a disclaimer. I don't know how to do this. She begins panoramically, 5 subjects, somewhat related, 3 or 4 sentences each. Jessie begins doubting herself, doubting this project. How cheap, how vulgar, how unworthy, how like the taste of sour milk to identify herself in terms of others, those she had the good fortune to know when she had good fortune. She begins to vanquish doubt. She cannot afford it. She begins to focus, to find the right words to open for, say, Martin Van Buren. She considers how to say this. His love of young people, no. His grown sons gone, he liked to gather other young people about him. She begins subtly to shift from the assigned topic, distinguished people I have known, to the real one, the Bodisco wedding, the teasing that James Buchanan was charmed by her, would seek her hand, how this vexed her, how she blunt cut her hair, how she then eloped with Mr. Fremont before her hair was long enough to stay up without a net. She learns sleight of hand, how to tuck into the middle what might frighten reader, subject, or herself. She learns how to evade naming offenses from which the country has not yet healed. About the beating in the Senate of Charles Sumner, Jessie writes of visiting him when he was very ill, as if this injury were an infectious disease. Though Grandmother Benton tells her sewing hurts your chest, and though she hates to sew, hates nimble, thimble, needle, thread, scissors, she learns to cut and seam together the pieces chance provides. Here now, red geraniums in the window box, cut them from life and stitch them in pen onto the scene in the dining room of Father's house before it burnt. And thus her frock takes shape. She begins to include dialogue, to add flashback, to convey depth, to alter, to mend, to measure her words to fit the style of the patron. It is a hard lesson, this writing. Jessie, the editor, Jessie, the compiler, begins to learn to write in her own voice. What is a poor woman to do? And she begins to find it also brings her pleasure. So let me turn to a couple of new poems, poems from Holding Myself Together. Here's the note of hope again. This poem will also be in an anthology of poems that play with Emily Dickinson's Hope poem. Hope is a thing with feathers. I knew it would come back to me. Anyway, my poem is Hope is the Thing That Flies. Sow as early in spring as the ground can be worked. Cool weather crops, lettuce, spinach, radishes. Hope first sprouts soon. Look, distinct green shape like butterfly wings. Hope like a butterfly. First, a tiny egg nearly invisible on the back of a leaf, then caterpillar, chrysalis, wings, the ability to fly, a light on a flower, pollinate. Hope now for the fruit, and rain for the radishes. I'm going to conclude with this poem that was in Justice, Freedom, Herbs, but it's also going to appear one of those hear it again kinds of things. Housewarming prayer for Andy Kumble Floyd. Let there be cinnamon and nutmeg to grace the flavor of pumpkin soup and apple pie. In honor of Ruth, let there be spaghetti sauce. In memory of Georgina, let it begin with garlic and parsley. Let all the named and nameless women who ever cooked in this kitchen return with their blessings. Let all the dear women who wanted to or who had to start over, start here with me. Let us continue in each other's names. Let there be clean water, clean dishes, clean floors, clean windows, clean air, and inviting mountains that extend and anchor my view. Let there be firm footing, an open door, and friends. In honor of those who have been bruised, let the words of the unheard be heard. Let there be plum trees. Let there be a porch swing and cafe chairs and rocks at the side of the water where I can dangle my feet. Let there be a strong and gentle dog and a porch where she can nap. Let there be goats to tend and the skill to tend them. Let there be a horse to groom, train, and ride. Let there be books to hide in and to emerge from with renewed courage. Let there be writers and writing. Let them be here in spirit. Let there be James Baldwin, Lopez Lemon, Aggie, and Gruff. In memory of all who worked or who were denied the land and who imagined what could be, let there be mercy. Let justice flow like water and an integrity like an unfailing stream. Let there be local prophets like Amos. Let there be justice, freedom, and herbs.
So good, Peggy. Yes, thank you, thank you, thank you. Those were just wonderful.
That was really wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Peggy. And I just have to apologize